Hey everybody, welcome to our Monday night call. I am excited to share with you tonight some things that I have really had on my heart the past couple of weeks because I've had several conversations with team members that don't have any idea that I've had conversations with other team members about the same topic, and that is time management. I think because, it's back to school, the extracurricular activities are all starting back up. Maybe you are a homeschooling mom, and, I think we're all just kind of at a place where how we're going to fit it all in 24 hours. We feel like we need 28 hours in a day and things like that. And so I just figured that if we were struggling with some of these things, that I was just imagining a lot of you guys were too. And so I just thought that I would share about this topic because I've read quite a few books about time management. And I want to preface this call by telling you that I am not the best at this. It's something that I struggle with, which is why I've read books about it. And I'm really just taking the role of lead learner here. Please do not think that I do this perfectly because I promise you I do not. The struggle is real, but I do love to learn, and so I want to just pass on to you guys what I have learned and my favorite things that have helped me in my journey to, manage my time better, manage my life, and just, you know, fit it all in and manage this craziness that we call life. So, we know that there is no like magic, dramatic, once in a lifetime event that is going to change our lives, right? Change comes with time, with it's really just accumulation of the decisions that you make on a daily basis. So success is found in your daily habits, and that can be applied to any area of your life. If you want to know what your health is going to look like 5 or 10 years from now, you take a look at what you eat every day. If you want to know what your financial situation is going to look like 5 or 10 years from now, you take a look at what you spend every day. If you want to know what your marriage is going to look like 5 or 10 years from now, you take a look at how many conversations you have every day, or how much time you spend communicating, or, doing things for your spouse or whatever, how much you invest in your marriage every day. If you want to know what your body's going to look like 5 or 10 years from now, you take a look at your fitness level every day. Like, what kind of exercises are you doing every day? If you want to know what your toddler is going to look like 10 years from now, take a look at the discipline that you give that child and the love that you give that child every day. So you really can apply that to any area of your life. Your daily habits are going to be the determining factor of what your life looks like and how it changes over time. And so your daily habits are super important. So that being said, I want to ask you a really important question. If you have something handy to write with, I'd really love for you to write the answer down to this question. If you don't have anything to write with, that's okay. Maybe you can use the notepad on your device. But the question is, if success is found in your daily habits, what one thing could you do that you are not doing now, that if you did it on a regular basis, it would have a tremendous positive impact in your life? I'm going to repeat that. What one thing could you do that you are not doing now, that if you did it on a regular basis, it would make a tremendous positive difference in your life? So that could be, I don't know, exercise maybe, or maybe you should feel like you should be meal prepping, or maybe you're supposed to be doing your personal growth and you just don't make time for it. Maybe it's praying, maybe it's having a conversation with your husband, maybe it's if looking at your financial situation, maybe it's skipping a small expense that you spend money on needlessly every day. Whatever the case is, write it down, because we're going to come back to the answer to this question in just a little while. And after you've written that one down, I want you to also answer the same question about your business. So what one thing could you do that you are not doing now, that if you did it on a regular basis would make a tremendous positive difference in your business. So that could be like IPA. Maybe it's personal growth because you hear that over and over that you're supposed to do that and you don't. Maybe it's coaching your team. Maybe it's watching a training video each day. Maybe it's doing an event that you're holding out on. It's going to be different for everybody, but write it down. So I want to give you guys a quote from a book by E.M. Gray. And E.M. Gray spent his entire life trying to figure out like the one key factor, I guess, that all successful people had in common. And then he wrote a book about it called The Common Denominator of Success. And here's what he said. Successful people have the habit of doing things that failures don't like to do. It's not that they enjoy doing them, but their disliking is subordinated to the strength of their purpose. So in other words, do the things that you don't want to do, right? It's not that successful people love doing the hard things, right? It's not that it comes easy to them. It's just that they have a big why. And you should have a big why too. So you need to be a function of your values, not of your impulses, right? And what that means is take a look at the activities that you do each day. How are you spending your time? Does it line up with what your values are? So how do you know what your values are? Let me give you guys an illustration. I want you to imagine that 3 years in the future, you are walking into a funeral home for a viewing. And as you walk down the aisle and you walk toward the casket at the front, you see your friends and family on both sides. They're all upset and crying and mourning. And you're a little confused, but you walk up to the casket and you look down and it's you lying there in the casket. And everyone is there to mourn the loss of you. And this is 3 years in the future. What do you want people to say? If you were standing there listening, what would you want your spouse to say about you? What would you want to hear your kids say about you? Would you want them to say, you're hardworking, you're dependable, you're sacrificial? Whatever the case is for you, this is a good exercise to write down too. I really recommend that you spend like 15 minutes or 20 minutes thinking about this one day, but you really do need to know like what you would want your spouse and kids to say about you. What would you want your parents to say about you? What would you want your pastor to say about you? What would you want your upline to say about you? What would you want your downline to say about you? What would you want your sidelines to say about you, or your coworkers, or your best friends? What would you want all of these people to say about you? And the answer to those questions will give you a really good idea of what your values are. Okay, and so then take a look at the way you spend your time every single day now. Is the way that you are spending your time every single day and what you're doing all day, does it line up with what your values are? Because if it's not, it's time to do some reevaluating of how you're spending your time, okay? So now that you know what your values are, I want to show you guys something. I see that the call is maxed, y'all. I'm sorry. I think my Zoom just holds 100 people, but this is being recorded. Okay, can everybody see this? Nod your head if you see this chart. Okay. All right, this is called the time management matrix. And basically, we spend time in one of 4 quadrants. It's broken down into 4 different quadrants, and everything is basically defined by the level of urgency and the level of importance. So we have quadrant 1 here, that's things that are urgent and important. And then we have quadrant 2 where it's not urgent, but it is important. And then we have quadrant 3 where it is urgent, but it's not important. And then we have quadrant 4 where it's not urgent and it's not important. Okay, so let me give you guys some examples of what some activities that would go in each one of these quadrants. So let's define some terms first. Urgent means basically that it demands your immediate attention or immediate action. Okay, it's like something that if you don't do it, there's going to be consequences. Important has to do more with results. It contributes to like what your mission is or what your values are or your goals are. Okay, so it's going to get you results. But urgent causes us to react, and things that are important really take initiative and proactivity on our part. Okay, so quadrant 1, what are some things that would go in quadrant 1? It would be like maybe your kid getting hurt, somebody falling and breaking an arm. Obviously, that is important, very important, because if you don't do something about it, there's going to be grave consequences, and it's also very urgent, like you need to deal with it right now. Or like your spouse is mad at you. That's important, and that's urgent. Or like your toddler just dumped nail polish all over the tile floor. Or maybe Titus falls through the springs of the trampoline and his belt loop caught the hook and he's hanging there and he needs somebody help get him down. Or maybe that's here. Maybe that's important, but it's like, it'd be all right. I'm just kidding. That's here. But basically, quadrant 1 is any kind of crisis. It's like a pressing problem, like you got to deal with it. It's really important. Do it now. If it was in your business, it might be going for a rank up, like trying to meet a deadline, or maybe you're trying to hit a certain goal for a convention contest or leadership contest, or maybe you have somebody who's trying to sign up and they're having a problem with the website. Or maybe you have a conflict in your downline that needs to be dealt with. Just things like that. Time-sensitive things. That the chats, the IPA chats need to be set up on the 1st or the 2nd of the month. Just time-sensitive things. Like, you got to get it done. It's important and it's urgent, okay? Quadrant 2 examples, those are things that they don't really feel urgent, but they're very, very important. These are activities that build your life in accordance with what your values are. So these are things that if you don't do them, you feel guilty about it because you know you should. Like, you need to spend time with your family every day. Maybe exercising. Maybe you need to spend more time planning. Meal prepping. Those are quadrant 2 things. Personal growth, because that definitely does not feel urgent, but it's very important. If you're a homeschooler, these are things like math, language arts, science, memory work, right? If you're in college, it would be something like studying, unless it's time for finals, and then that would be here, like learn all the things. But basically things that you need to do them because they're very, very important, but they don't ever feel urgent. If it's your business, it's things like IPA, coaching your team, building relationships with people on your team, setting goals, planning, personal growth, again, maybe doing some reflection about what worked and what didn't, building your brand on Facebook. Those are all quadrant 2 activities. Quadrant 3 activities, they feel urgent, but they're not really that important. And that would be like some phone calls, because some phone calls really are important, but some phone calls not really, not so much, right? It would be like answering questions that people can find the answers for themselves. It would be like just interruptions, distractions throughout the day. It might be I don't know, maybe somebody asking you to volunteer for something. They don't have anybody else to do it. It feels urgent. Like it, and usually quadrant 3 activities, they feel urgent because you don't want to let somebody down. Like it's usually some kind of external pressure, not really something that is in line with what your core values are, but you don't want to let people down. And so that's kind of a quadrant 3 thing. Quadrant 4 is just time wasters, right? The people that say they don't have time to build a business, but they're sending you Candy Crush requests and all that stuff. Candy Crush is a time waster. That's quadrant 4. Watching TV, just like entertaining yourself all the time. Video games, just gabbing on the phone. And I've totally been guilty of that. Scrolling Facebook, things like that, that really are not adding anything to your mission, or they don't add any value. They're not helping you design your life or, live in accordance with what your why is or what your dreams and goals are. So that's kind of an overview and some examples of what the 4 quadrants are. Now, if you spend a lot of time here in quadrant 1, then your life is really stressful. Like you fight one crisis and then bam, get knocked down by another crisis, and then bam, it's just like putting out fires all day. These people are really, really stressed out, and they can get burnout very, very quickly. And they tend to, like when they don't have a crisis, they go right to here just as like an escape for a few minutes, I'm sure we've all been there and done that. These are quadrant 2 is these are things that are going to build your life and design a life in accordance with your values. So quadrant 3, these are things that would cause somebody, like if people spend a lot of time in quadrant 3, they're going to feel like victimized. They're going to feel like their life is out of control. They're going to feel like they're going to have like a lot of broken relationships, maybe shallow relationships. People that spend a lot of time, or the majority of their time in quadrants 3 and 4, these are people that they're just like totally irresponsible, right? They can't pay their bills. They're dependent on other people for basic needs. They're just like irresponsible. So you definitely don't want to spend most of your time here. You need to know what your values are so that you are not spending most of your time in quadrant 3. If you know what your core values are, then you won't fall victim to constantly spending time, because everything's not going to feel as urgent. You can decide, okay, this is important or it's not as important. Like, does it line up with what my goals are and what my values are, right? So the most effective people spend most of their time right here, quadrant 2. So you definitely want to be spending a lot of your time here. And a lot of times too, really effective or successful people, they spend most of their time in quadrants 1 and 2. And the more time you spend in quadrant 2, it kind of minimizes the time you have to spend in quadrant 1. You're never going to completely eliminate quadrant 1, but you can plan for it and spend more time here so that you spend less time there. To spend most of your time in quadrants 1 and 2, obviously at first it's going to have to take away from quadrants 3 and 4. You will have to learn to say no to some things, and I'll talk more about that later. But so I want to go back to the question that I asked you guys earlier that you wrote down the answer to. Let me stop the share. Okay, so what one thing could you do that you're not doing now, that if you do on a regular basis would have a tremendous positive impact on your life? What quadrant is that activity in? Type it in the chat. I'm just curious to see this. Somebody type it. Anybody? Quadrant 2. Yes. Okay, you guys are awesome. I figured it was going to be quadrant 2, guys, because quadrant 2 activities are really, really powerful, right? They're deeply, deeply important. But because they don't feel urgent, you don't do them. So we have to learn how to spend more time in quadrant too. Okay. Okay, so some tips to spend more time. I already said that. Spend more time in quadrant 2. You have to take away from 3 and 4 at first. You have to learn how to say no, and just keep in mind that you're always saying no to something. So if you're not saying no to the things that feel urgent to you, then guess what that means you're saying no to? The things that are important, right? So you're always going to be saying no to something. The enemy of the best is often the good. So sometimes it's not something that is terribly awful, that is taking you away from what your core values are. Sometimes it's good, but it's not the best. And so just have to always ask yourself, does this line up with what my values are? Is this changing my life? Is this, contributing to what my mission is for my life? Another thing is learn to delegate. If someone can do something 80% as good as you can do it, you really should delegate it if possible. And that's hard for a lot of people because the first thought is, well, if I'm going to take the time to teach somebody how to do it, it would be quicker for me to just do it myself, and I could do it better myself. But that does not save you time in the long run for you to just do it yourself. For example, my kids know how to clean my whole house. And when they were probably 6 and 8, my oldest 2 boys, I spent a lot of time investing in teaching them how to do household chores. They cleaned the bathrooms, they washed the dishes, they cleaned the kitchen, all that stuff. So I could say I had an hour every night after dinner for a week. And I could take that hour and clean the whole kitchen top to bottom myself, and it would be 100% clean. Or I could take that hour and teach my children how to do it, show them how I want it done. The next week, I'll do it with them, and it'd probably be about 80% as good as I would do it myself. But over time, now, they're teenagers, and I don't ever have to clean the kitchen. So it saves me an hour every single day now because I was willing to put in the time on the front end, okay? It's the same with disciplining your children or whatever. So learn how to delegate, because that's really important, and it will save you time in the long run if you learn how to delegate things. And I don't mean like delegate something and then micromanage it. I mean like truly delegate it, right? Teach somebody how to do it, and that really is truly leveraging your time. Also, keep in mind that when you're dealing with people, you cannot think about efficiency. You can be efficient with things, but you have to be effective with people. Okay, so when we're dealing with people, we have to think about effectiveness. And what I mean by that is like a text versus a phone call. So like if you're trying to think of time efficiency, obviously a text message or a voice message is way more efficient. But is it as effective? No, it's not. You can't get as much done through a text message or even a voice message as you can through a phone call. Phone calls are super effective because they're very personable. You can hear someone's responses. You can gauge, their interest level or, what they're thinking or whatever. It's important to have conversations, and there's a lot that people are going to hold back. They're not going to say through a text message, it takes too long to type it up. And they're not going to say through a voice message because they're not going to be able to gauge how you would respond, right? And so it's just so important to be on the phone. That's really effective. It might not be as efficient, but it is effective. Another example would be like inviting people to events. So you can go on Facebook and you can create an event page and invite your entire 1,000 people friends list, right? That is efficient, but is it effective? No, it's not, because nobody's going to come if you do that. It's not effective at all. What's effective is messaging them personally, one by one. It's not super efficient, but it is super effective. Or like a homeschooling example, I allot 20 or 30 minutes for phonics with Grace. And if I'm feeling like we're rushing through it the whole entire time, then I'm going to get stressed out, right? And so is she. She's going to sense that tension coming from me. And so that is not effective. It might be efficient to try to fit it in that time slot, but it's not effective. So with people, you don't ever focus on what's the most efficient. You always focus on what's the most effective. All right, now, how do you spend your Plexus hours? You should have some business hours every day. If you are building a Plexus business, you need to have some business hours. A lot of things you can do in the nooks and crannies. I personally believe IPA is not really one of them because, I mean, I have to sit down and just figure out who I'm going to reach out to, first of all, unless somebody just pops into my mind that I, have encountered or whatever. But you do need to carve out some time to work your business, but how do you split up the time? So generally, if you are senior Ruby or below, you're going to spend 60% of your time in income producing activity. 25% of your time is going to be helping new ambassadors reach their goals, and new as in they've joined you in the last 6 months or sooner. And then the other 15% is all other Plexus related things like, working with your runners and things like that. Okay. So that, I'm going to say that again, 60% IPA, 25% with new ambassadors, because it takes a lot of time to train new ambassadors and help them reach their goals. And then 15% doing other things, other Plexus tasks. Okay. And then I wanted to show you guys my schedule because sometimes it just helps to have an example of how somebody else spends their day. And this is what my life looks like on paper. It is not what my life is usually like in reality, but I just didn't want to share this with you guys. Okay, so basically what I did, I have 5 kids, 7 people in my house. I sat down and I made a list of everything that I needed to do in a 24-hour period. Okay, that includes sleep, showering, whatever. Okay, making meals, whatever, homeschooling, Plexus, everything. And then I did the exact same thing for everybody else in my house. And then I sat down on my computer and tried to basically just fit it all together like a puzzle. Just trying to see, like, Noah, he wants to practice his guitar. So I'm like, okay, well, when can he do that? Where will it fit in or whatever, And so I just try to kind of piece it together like a puzzle. And this is basically what it looks like. I homeschool in the morning. I do Plexus in the afternoons. I work out after that. Then we eat supper, have some family time, and I have a couple more hours of Plexus in the evening. So that's what my day looks like. And then I have, my kids' days all planned out. My husband goes to work. And then Tuesday is a special day because we're not home. That's our community day. We do classical conversation. So that is just my Tuesday schedule. But I just wanted to share that with you guys. Again, this is not what my life always looks like in reality, because somebody's going to dump baby powder all over the carpet, or somebody's going to poop their pants and they're going to need a bath immediately or whatever, right? So we're not a slave to this schedule by any means. We're super flexible. But I do find that when we try to stick to a routine, that we get a lot more done. And I don't stress if we're not like exactly in the time slots, And sometimes I work more hours in this, to be honest with you. With Plexus, like, I don't always stick to this. I wish I could, but I don't always stick to that, especially like if I'm working hard toward a goal or whatever. So that is just one example, and you guys can maybe glean something from that. All right, guys. Well, that is pretty much what I want to share with you guys about time management. I hope this helped you, and message me if you have any questions, and I hope you guys have a good night. Bye.